Tony Stark slowly opened his eyes. The severe pain in his head made his mind go blank. He subconsciously wanted to take deep breaths to relieve the twitching pain. But after exerting force, he noticed the foreign body sensation in his nose, and quickly pulled out the thing in his nose. It turned out to be a breathing tube, but looking at the gray-yellow color on it, Tony suddenly felt a little chilly. This must be too dirty. However, the pain that came from his brain and throat at the same time soon left him no time to care about whether the breathing tube was clean. He wanted to get up, but found that his upper body was fixed to the bed by a wooden frame, and he could not move at all. Neng reached out and groped around on the bedside table, hoping to find something to ease his predicament. Even if he couldn't find a glass of water, it would at least make his throat more comfortable. Soon Tony's hand felt the cold metal touch. He opened his palm and touched it. It should be a quilt, because the bedside table was much higher than the bed he was lying on, so Tony couldn't see what was going on above, so he could only be careful. To test, slowly pick up the cup. The pain and weakness left him with little strength, and it was difficult for him to hold even a glass of water steadily. Soon another force was added to the cup, helping Tony Stark bring the water cup to his mouth. There was no time to say thank you, but the burning pain in his throat made Tony eagerly drink the water from the cup. The cool pleasure passed through his mouth and fell down his throat into his stomach, just like drizzle moistening the dry land. Tony couldn't quite remember it. It had been a long time since he had experienced this kind of refreshing feeling, even if it was just a glass of ordinary water in his hand, but in his opinion, even the most expensive wine in his wine library could not compare with it. "Oh, thank you very much. Can you tell me what's going on now?" After drinking every drop of the water in the cup, Tony remembered the person who brought him the water, turned his head and looked at the head of the bed, and what he saw was he is a bald man with a smile on his face. Anyone who sees the bald face for the first time will think that the owner of this face is a thug, and Tony is no exception, so after asking, he carefully added, you don't want to kidnap me, do you?" No, I had no intention of kidnapping you. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I saved your life." Raza had Elbert's instructions and had already released Tony Stark from the cave. Although the medical condition was still there, nothing improved, but at least Tony's first impression was that he was not imprisoned. "We found you during a battle with a group of thugs. There were corpses lying on the ground next to you. You're the only one. It's hard to imagine that you could survive such a violent bombardment. I have to say that it's really good luck." Raza's words slowly revived Tony's memory. He remembered what happened before he fell into coma. Their convoy was attacked. The enemy's firepower far exceeded the soldiers protecting him. In the end, Tony covered his head in pain. He only remembered that a bomb exploded next to him. He thought he was dead at the time. It seemed that God was still on his side. "Thank you, your kind deeds will be rewarded as you deserve." After thinking about the cause and effect, Tony's eyes were filled with joy for the rest of his life. At the same time, he was also very grateful to Raza for saving him. He raised his body and thought he stood up, but the wooden frame that fixed his upper body made it impossible for him to move. "This is it? This is to prevent you from moving around and pulling the wound. I can bring it, but don't do it rashly, otherwise the wound will be torn and it will be very troublesome." Raza put his hands on the wooden frame and saw Tony nodding before answering. "Open the locks on both sides and remove the wooden frame. Although you survived, the shrapnel has pierced your chest. We can only use magnets to absorb the shrapnel, otherwise they will flow along the blood vessels to your heart. His life is completely over." Without the obstruction of the wooden frame, Tony raised his body slightly and looked at the bandage tied to his chest. There was a round magnet underneath. 2 wires were connected to a battery along the edge of the bed to ensure that there would be enough suction at all times to immobilize the shrapnel that could kill him. "The medical conditions here are not good, so this is the last resort." Looking at Tony looking at the magnet on his chest, Raza added, "If your condition improves, we can consider taking you to the hospital, but not now." "I understand, and I'm very grateful to you for saving my life." Tony came back to his senses and thanked Raza again. The current situation was completely beyond his expectation, but fortunately, his ability to accept was not weak, and everyone else was after trying so hard to save him. It would be unreasonable to dislike him. Although Tony could be quite an asshole sometimes, he still couldn't do this kind of thing. Looking at the decorations around him, you could tell that the other person was not a rich person. "Is there a phone here? I hope you can contact the America garrison and ask them to send someone to pick me up. But thanks are thanks. Tony doesn't want to stay here any longer. He needs better medical conditions, but after saying the words, America garrison, Roz's face instantly turned ugly. This reminded him of where he was. This was the Imperial Cemetery. There were more than tens of millions of people who had a grudge against America. The bald man in front of him, couldn't it be one of them? Tony felt anxious for a moment. We do have a phone number, but I won't help you contact the America garrison. Because of some things, we don't want to contact them. Fortunately, although Roza didn't look good, he didn't do anything drastic, which made Tony relaxed. Take a breath. Are you afraid of them? You can rest assured that as long as you let me talk to them, I believe they will never make things difficult for you. Seeing that Roza's attitude did not change much, Tony continued to persuade. No, you don't understand. No matter who you are, those butchers will not let us go. As soon as they show up, they will want to kill us. You don't have to think about contacting the America garrison. If you want to contact your family, I want to help, but it must not have anything to do with the American garrison. Roza decisively rejected Tony's idea. He knew how much he had a foundation in the American military, and now it would be better to deceive Tony Stark. Okay. Once you come into contact with the American garrison, you're guaranteed to be beaten into pieces in minutes. That's okay. I'll give you a phone number. It's my uncle's. His name is Obadiah Stane. You can tell him my situation and he will send someone to rescue me. Seeing that Roza insisted on not wanting to talk to him, after being contacted by the military, Tony didn't know what to say, so he just asked for Obadiah's contact information. Although it might be a detour, it was better than nothing. Okay, I'll go right away. It turns out your name is Tony Stark, and your uncle's name is Obadiah, right? Roza held a piece of paper and asked Tony Stark to write down Obadiah's name and contact information. He was about to help him contact him, but when he turned around, he seemed to have found something on the note. He looked back at Tony with wide eyes. Wait a minute, you said this person named Obadiah is you? Uncle? Is he hairless like me and his beard is already a little gray? Yes, you have seen him? Is there any problem? Tony was confused by Roza's sudden movements, and he was also a little confused. How did Roza know what Obadiah looked like? After we defeated the group of thugs who attacked you, we intercepted something. I think you should maybe take a look. Roza looked at Tony with an expression of pity, and then turned to a table not far away. He went up and brought over a laptop that looked very damaged. Tony even doubted whether this thing could still be booted successfully. This computer belongs to the thug leader who attacked you. Many of the things in it have been unreadable due to damage to the disk. Only a few bits have been preserved. Among them is a paragraph about the leader and others. A person's call history. Roza lit up the laptop. After a short boot, only a few applications could be seen on the somewhat broken screen. In front of Tony, Roza clicked on a folder. For some reason, Tony suddenly became panicked before he saw the contents. Thinking of Roza's behavior just now, he had a bad premonition. Sure enough, a face that he was very familiar with quickly appeared on the screen. It was Obadiah. Although the screen kept flashing and most of the words were unintelligible, there was one sentence that Tony could hear very well. Clear? I hope to see Tony's body tomorrow. At this moment, Tony felt like the world was spinning. He couldn't believe that the person he once respected the most wanted to kill him. But the facts are in front of him, and it's impossible not to believe it. Tony hopes the video is fake, but as an expert in this field, he knows very well that this is not a synthesis, but a fact. Can you please leave me alone for a while? Tony reached out and clicked on some replays. He listened to Obadiah's murderous words over and over again. His expressions could not tell his emotional changes, but Roza, you know, he is a volcano now and may erupt at any time. I'm just outside the door. If anything happens, you can just shout. Roza wisely exited the tent, leaving enough space for Tony. As soon as the door curtain was closed, Roza's face suddenly turned into a sly smile. Deceiving a person like this. Genius is indeed a very enjoyable experience. Well done, I didn't expect you to have such acting skills. The sudden voice startled Lazar, but when he saw it was Elbert, he quickly put on a flattering look. You are all an adult, you have taught me well, I just following your orders. But my lord, is there any point in doing this? Tony Stark will find out sooner or later that I deceived him. How dark Roza's background is. You only need to check it to find out. Once Tony returns to Stark Industries, through a check of the military's network revealed everything. That's why I asked you to show Tony that video, so that he won't have time to trouble you. After a while, I will change your identity for you, and there won't be any problems. Show it to Tony Stark. The video was blurred, with only Obadiah's unilateral record, and it was deliberately made to look severely damaged, leaving only a few key words. Everything was true, except that Raza was removed. Just come out. Why, you can't bear to live as a warlord here and don't want to change your identity? Absolutely not. How dare I stay here? It's better to follow you for safety. Raza smiled bitterly. Before, he was so obsessed that he agreed to Obadiah to help him get rid of Tony Stark. Now he, as you see, if he kills Tony Stark, he himself won't survive. Regardless of whether the military was trying to trouble him or not, the group of guys wearing black body armor sent by Obadiah lying outside the camp would kill him. Recalling the special operations team that sneaked in quietly last night and almost killed him, Raza shuddered a little, but the look he looked at Elbert was more respectful. Such an elite soldier who could easily crush him could be defeated in the blink of an eye. All fell to the ground. This is not an adjective, but a real blink of an eye. Elbert also knocked out the guards in the Raza camp before, but that was just looking at the results directly. It was not as shocking as watching the process live, although he actually didn't watch it at all. See how Elbert did it, but this undoubtedly raised Elbert's image again. Now, Raza really has no objections to Elbert. He finally understood that he couldn't stay in the Imperial Cemetery. If he wanted to survive, he could only hold on to Elbert's golden thigh. Moreover, despite his current glory, he was a big boss, and even the American garrison couldn't find him. But to put it bluntly, isn't it still a mouse hiding in Tibet? Once he is discovered one day, it will be the moment of catastrophe. Instead of eating ashes here, it is better to change his identity with Elbert and find a new way out. 3 days later, Tony's body had almost recovered. Although nothing could be done about the shrapnel in his chest, at least it would not affect his normal activities. During this period, Tony did not mention the Obadiah incident again, except that the phone had been completely broken. Computer, no one knows what he is thinking. Are you leaving today? I hope you won't come back again. This is not a place for people like you. Raza raised his glass and touched it with Tony. With his superb acting skills in the past 3 days, Raza with a black face but kind heart image, he successfully gained Tony's trust. Aren't you coming with me? You also know that this place is not good. Leave with me. Even your brothers, Stark Industries has a place to house them. After seeing the harsh environment of the camp, Tony couldn't bear to give in. If his savior continues to stay in this place, isn't it just a few hundred people? The Stark industrialist has a huge business and is afraid that he won't be able to support them? No, this is our hometown. Even if it is really not good, we will not leave. Raza took a sip of the wine, and a slightly bitter taste passed through his throat, just like his life, even if sometimes it tastes bad. Well, you'll still swallow it. Well, I hope we still have a chance to meet. Tony didn't know how to comfort Raza. He was a prodigal son who never knew the meaning of home. Since his father passed away, he had no concept of home. Maybe. Tony suddenly remembered a beautiful figure. That was the last person he recalled under the bomb. Maybe she was the only one who could give him the feeling of home. Potts. For the first time, the prodigal son also felt homesick. There will be a chance. I can survive until now, but I am not a fool. Raza laughed, but he felt very guilty. This time he almost fell into trouble. That's good, it's almost time. I'm leaving. Putting down the wine glass in his hand, Tony looked at the watch Raza gave him. It was not long before the appointed time. He waved goodbye to Raza and Stark sat down. Got into a jeep. Knowing that Obadiah was the mastermind behind the scenes, Tony naturally had no intention of continuing to contact him, so he contacted Potts through Jarvis. And at Raza's request, agreed on a place relatively far away from the camp to pick him up. Pack your things, we should go. Watching Tony Stark leave, Raza squeezed out tears and scolded the bastard who gave him the idea. She shouldn't have listened to his nonsense and eaten that shit. I can't stop crying now. Mr. Stark, we can only send you here. There is a safe area ahead. There will be no danger, so we can only let you pass by yourself. After sending Tony to the agreed place, the driver stopped. Raza had given them repeated orders not to come into contact with the people who came to pick up Tony, so naturally they did not dare to follow Tony there. Seeing this, Tony didn't insist. He opened the car door directly, walked out with a battery in his arms, and waited next to a huge amount of stone for only a short while before he saw a Black Hawk helicopter flying towards his position. After many days, Tony looked at the helicopter, feeling a new life in his heart, but also a little empty, as if something was missing. It would be great if Raza left with me. Thinking of Raza's somewhat fierce face, Tony still felt nostalgic, but seeing Li Ying eagerly jumping out of the landing helicopter, Tony instantly put that aside, leaving the disappointment behind. He hugged the other person's body tightly. Potts? It's quite expected, but, not far away, Elbert followed the shadow of the mound and observed the people around Tony Stark. In addition to the expected Pepper Potts, there were also Colonel Rhodes, and a beautiful woman with red shawl, short hair and a very sexy figure. Can S.H.I.E.L.D. not be able to bear it anymore? Although the identity of the other party was not confirmed, Elbert still recognized the other party due to this obvious feature: S.H.I.E.L.D.'s level 7, level 10 in the comics, mainly the movie version here, Agent, the famous Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff. Tony's father, Howard, is one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., and his importance is indeed worthy of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s dispatch. Everything is over. I believe that after Tony returns, Obadiah will treat him well. Although Elbert is very fond of Obadiah, Dai has no confidence at all, but this does not prevent him from clarifying the relationship. At least as a check, Obadiah can still hold on for a few months. Even though his attack on Tony was exposed, in many cases, evidence is required. Tony had completely destroyed the only evidence in his anger. This time he could only fight with Obadiah when he returned. Just what Elbert wanted. He has already changed part of his destiny. Tony has not yet become Iron Man, and the fight with Obadiah is bound to continue to delay this progress. When will Tony suddenly have a sudden idea to build a steel battlesuit? Not now anyway. Then the next step is to replace Osborne Industries. He hopes that the hungry wolves on Wall Street have made enough profits for him in this incident, so that he can get rid of those shareholders first and annex Osborne Industries faster. The terrorists like Raza have now surrendered to him. This is a very considerable force. He does not need to worry about manpower issues in the near future, so in order to allow them to appear as an above-board person, Elbert must get it done as soon as possible. Osborne Industries, and then clear their identities. Mr. Elbert, this is the result of the mission you entrusted us to operate. It's really unimaginable. If I hadn't known that you had been in New York these days, I would have even thought that you had kidnapped Mr. Stark. Henry said with admiration on his face. A certificate of equity holding was handed to Elbert. A few days ago, Elbert went to Wall Street to find them and asked them to buy Stark Industries stock, which had plummeted due to the disappearance of Tony Stark. Now, it was time for them to show the results of the transaction. 2% of Stark Industries shares are very good. Your company is well deserved. If there are similar jobs in the future, I will definitely give you priority. Elbert looked at the number on the certificate with satisfaction. All his savings, except for normal apart from the living expenses, it has become such a proof, but he does not regret it, and he will not regret doing anything else. Although 2% is a small amount, Stark Industries' market value is close to $300 billion US. This 2% is equivalent to $6 billion. And with the return of Tony Stark, Stark Industries stocks have begun to rise again. Now I want to use there is no way to buy it at normal prices, let alone Elbert bought it at the lowest price. Thank you very much for your trust. To be honest, we could have acquired more, but the competitors are too strong. This 2% is already the limit. Henry said with some regret. The predators who came out of the middle were too many and too strong, and they didn't dare to provoke them easily. I understand this, and I'll be happy to work together next time. Regarding Henry's statement, Elbert responded with an understanding smile. This is a normal situation. The Stark industrial volume is placed there. Tony Stark is very important, but compared to the entire company, it's not that important. Now that the stock price has plummeted, I don't know how many hungry wolves want to swallow this piece of fat. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. has intervened. If he hadn't seen the opportunity quickly, let alone 2%, 100%. Even 0.2% may not be obtained. After sending Henry away, Elbert was confirmed to have locked the safe and was pruning branches in the backyard leisurely, waiting for others to come to the door. These 2% shares were not easy to get. Elbert believed that Henry's professional ethics would not reveal his information, otherwise he wouldn't have found him, but some things can't be hidden, at least not from S.H.I.E.L.D. Sir, I remember that breaking into a private house is a felony. Even if you were a police officer, I have the right to shoot you. So before I do it, please give me a valid reason. Otherwise I will say goodbye to the rest of your life. Sure enough, Henry didn't walk long before someone easily opened Elbert's locked door and appeared in front of him like a leisurely stroll. I am Agent Phil Coulson, representing the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. Here's my ID. Appearing opposite Elbert was a middle-aged man in his 30s, with an average height of America is taller, not too outstanding, and his hair is meticulously combed, which shows that he is a very serious person. Homeland Strategy? Are you from the Department of Defense? I don't remember what I did to sell out America. You have the wrong person. Elbert stopped his pruning work and pointed to the table and chair next to him to signal Phil Coulson to sit down. He poured himself a cup of black tea, and poured another cup for Phil Coulson, and then drank by himself, not caring about Phil Coulson's name at all. No, we are not part of the Department of Defense of America, but an independent department directly under the International Security Council. Phil Coulson took a sip of black tea and praised the taste, then smiled and gave Elbert some information about which department he belonged to, and then he said directly, "We found out, Dr. Elbert, that during the disappearance of Tony Stark, the chairman of Stark Industries, you entrusted Henry Firm to earn a large amount of funds and exchanged them for 100% of Stark Industries, 2 shares. Yes, you are very well informed. Henry just came over half an hour ago to hand over the equity certificate to me. But what's the matter? There are many people who make more than me. You can't arrest me for this, right?" Elbert was quite cheerful. He admitted the fact. There is nothing to hide. Being secretive will only arouse suspicion. Absolutely not. America is a free country, and the stock market is even more so. The fact that you can make so much money, doctor, is your ability. Naturally, we have no right to interfere. Phil Coulson nodded and said that Elbert was right, and then the conversation changed. But, Dr. Elbert, please explain, why did you issue the commission when Mr. Stark had not yet been reported missing? Did you know that Mr. Stark would disappear? Or, you were the one who disappeared, the culprit. Who is the culprit? You can't slander anyone. You have to rely on evidence to do anything. Be careful if I sue you for defamation. Now I am also a rich man. Believe it or not, I will sue you until you go bankrupt. Regarding Phil Coulson's accusation, Elbert decisively refused to answer. And I have no reason and no ability to be the culprit. I have been resting at home during this period, and the neighbors around me can testify for me. No, you have a reason. You were fired by Stark Industries a few years ago, right? You had the motive to murder Mr. Stark. As for proof of presence, this is not a problem. Some things do not require you to do it yourself. Just hire someone else to do it. You just need to make a few phone calls. Phil Coulson's eyes gradually became stern, and he even bowed slightly, and his hand had already reached the holster of the gun, as if he was facing the thug. Always be ready to draw your gun and fight back. For a moment, the atmosphere between the two people solidified. Elbert put down the teacup, stared at the agent in front of him seriously, suddenly smiled strangely, and the next words made Phil Coulson's face change drastically. "Agent Phil Coulson, I'm in the tea room. It's poisoned." Ha ha, ha 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 ha, Agent Phil Coulson, you really should take a closer look. Your expression just now was so funny, ha ha ha. In the backyard, Elbert held his stomach and laughed wildly, while Phil Coulson on the other side looked embarrassed. Elbert's words of poisoning frightened him so much that he almost drew a gun and threatened Elbert to hand over the antidote. Although he couldn't see his face, Phil Coulson could still imagine that it was definitely not worth it. Things to remember. "Dr. Elbert, have you laughed enough? You have to know that if I had been a little too aggressive just now, you might be lying on the ground now." Looking at Elbert, who was still laughing wildly, Phil Coulson put the drawn pistol on the table. "Go up," said angrily. "But you didn't you? You are a good man, Phil Coulson. I can see that." Seeing Phil Coulson's depressed expression, Elbert stopped laughing, but the smile in his eyes couldn't stop, and he sat down again. On the chair, he picked up the teapot and gave himself another cup, then motioned to Phil Coulson, "Would you like another cup? It tastes great." "No, Dr. Elbert, intimidating government personnel is a felony." Hearing Elbert's question, Phil Coulson became even darker and said with gritted teeth. If he hadn't been a good old man, Elbert would have had his head ripped open by now. "Slandering a legal citizen is also a felony. Agent Phil Coulson, it was you who first threatened me with a bunch of non-existent myths." Elbert spread his hands in a good mood. indicating that it was none of my business. You're the one who made the move first. Hans, I am just treating others in their own way. Okay, I admit my mistake. I shouldn't have done this. But Dr. Elbert, you do have suspicions. If you don't explain clearly why you know, Tony Stark will disappear. And we may take some extraordinary measures. My colleagues will not everyone has a good temper. Phil Coulson first decisively admitted his mistake, and then advised him in a sincere tone. I didn't know that Tony Stark would disappear. Elbert shook his head in denial. When Phil Coulson wanted to refute, he raised his hand to stop Phil Coulson and continued. When I was fired from Stark Industries, it did make me feel a little uncomfortable. So after getting my patent licensing fees, I decided to buy a batch of Stark Industries stocks. Definitely, this is not the main reason why I can seize the opportunity. Seeing Phil Coulson's disbelief, Elbert continued to add, what really made me determined was Tony Stark's absence from the annual award ceremony for the highest honor. I don't know that Tony Stark is missing, but his lack of concern for national awards will undoubtedly turn some people off to him. In addition, Stark Industries has been working behind closed doors some time ago and has not developed any new products. There are rumors that there are problems with Stark Industries' new research and development. Tony himself was trapped in the laboratory because of this, so he was unable to attend the award ceremony. But this is just a rumor, not enough for people to believe it. Doctor, you are not a fool. You cannot believe it easily. Phil Coulson also heard similar rumors. This is true. In fact, it is more than that. For example, Stark fell ill, and even there are so many rumors about being in ruins that if you really want to investigate, there are all kinds of outrageous rumors. I definitely don't believe it, but what does it matter whether I believe it or not? Elbert affirmed Phil Coulson's words, but then asked, do you know what are the important conditions that affect the stock market? Sometimes the news is on the surface. Is more likely to affect changes in the stock market than facts. Regardless of whether the news is true or false, as long as most people pass on the news, they will think that it may be true, and this possibility will cause Stark Industries stock to fall. In ancient times, in this place, this is called three people becoming a tiger. So, Doctor, you have chosen to buy shares of Stark Industries at this time? Phil Coulson had a look of disbelief on his face, but this seemed to be a reason. That's it. I thought Stark Industries stock would fall, but I didn't expect it to fall to such a degree because of Mr. Stark's disappearance. It's lucky to say the least. Elbert said with a thankful expression. Okay, Dr. Elbert, thank you for clarifying my doubts. I apologize again for being rude before. I hope you don't mind. Phil Coulson stood up and said with a sincere face. Definitely, this is your job. I'm glad you can take it so seriously. At least it shows that there are good people like you, Agent Phil Coulson, doing their best to protect us law-abiding citizens. Elbert also stood up. Holding Phil Coulson's hand, I also apologize for my previous rudeness, and I hope to get your forgiveness. Thank you very much for your understanding. You said that I am a good person, and good people don't care about this. Phil Coulson's face warmed up, and he followed Elbert's words and made a little joke. Excuse me for today. Now that the matter is clear, then it's time for me to say goodbye. Go on your way, I won't see you off. Elbert watched Phil Coulson walk out of the house, and politely helped him close the useless door. He smiled in return. The two of them looked away for a moment. The smile on Coulson's face disappeared. But Elbert still had a smile on his face, but compared to the formulaic smile before, this time he was sincere. If nothing else, he should be able to be quiet for a while. Will Phil Coulson believe his reasons? He will definitely not believe it. He is a good old man, but he is not an senile person. If he believes this nonsense, Nick Fury will definitely kick him out of S.H.I.E.L.D. But since Phil Coulson left without revealing anything, this at least shows that his, or S.H.I.E.L.D.'s attitude towards Elbert is not as tough as it seems, and this inquiry is more like a warning. They don't know if Elbert is real and has something to do with Tony Stark's disappearance. The purpose of Phil Coulson coming here is to warn Elbert that no matter whether he is really related or not, we have already targeted you. Please be more honest in the future and don't cause trouble just because you think you have some money. The warning is over, at least until the next time it is discovered that Elbert is related to some big event. S.H.I.E.L.D. will not take any action against him. Definitely, if they take action, it will not be such a light warning now. Phil Coulson walked out of Elbert's house with no smile on his face before. It was pretty much what Elbert had thought. His mission this time was mainly to warn and test. Is the disappearance of Tony Stark related to Elbert? S.H.I.E.L.D. still felt some numbers. Even if we didn't know it before, it was Obadiah who sent people to get rid of Tony, but with Black Widow, a top agent, making insinuations, the matter was generally clear, but there was one thing that made Nick Fury very confused. The people who rescued Tony were found in the military network, and they were definitely not good people. If Obadiah hired them to attack Tony, Nick would think it was reasonable, but in fact it was just the opposite. They rescued Tony. And he was released safely, which I couldn't figure out at all. But America was too far away in the Imperial Cemetery, and he wanted to figure out the key. It would not happen overnight. Under Elbert's order, Raza had already hidden his people. Nick Fury wanted to find it, and it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. So as the next best thing, Nick asked Phil Coulson to handle another strange thing. According to all investigation results, Elbert did have nothing to do with Stark's disappearance, but this was the biggest doubt. Nick didn't believe in coincidence, so let Phil Coulson try it out, but now it seems that Phil Coulson didn't get much useful information. "Sir." Phil Coulson walked straight to the car not far away. Two agents responsible for monitoring and preventing accidents opened the door and asked about the next step. "Go back first, don't alert the enemy yet." Phil Coulson got into the back seat and motioned for one of the agents to drive. He leaned on the seat, closed his eyes and thought for a while, then dialed Nick Fury's phone. "Director, this is Phil Coulson." "Phil Coulson, how was the result of the mission?" Nick Fury didn't wait for what Phil Coulson said and directly asked about the result of the test. He believed that Phil Coulson would not disturb him before the mission was completed. "I'm sorry, Director. I didn't get much useful information." Phil Coulson felt a little ashamed. He had done similar tasks countless times, but rarely failed like today. "Then you think Elbert has no problem?" Nick frowned when he heard Phil Coulson's words. Phil Coulson is not usually outstanding, but in the entire S.H.I.E.L.D., his ability is definitely ranked high, and he didn't even ask anything. Come on, he underestimated Elbert. "No, on the contrary, I think Elbert has a big problem. Although Tony Stark's disappearance has nothing to do with him, he must have known that Tony Stark would disappear." Phil Coulson recalled every detail of his contact with Elbert. "Too calm and overconfident, so confident that he doesn't look like a scientist who just got rich overnight, but a powerful monarch. And he seems to know that I will find him, even he knows that which department does it belong to." "That's impossible, Phil Coulson. Our existence is highly confidential. Even Tony Stark doesn't know about it. He can't know." Nick tapped his fingers on the table. While refuting Phil Coulson, his mind was also racing. Analysis. Elbert knew about S.H.I.E.L.D. How did he know it? In other words, there was actually a huge force behind him. "I understand this, but Director, Elbert's behavior at that time was too calm, as if everything was definitely, and he even dared to communicate with me in a provocative way. This is not the state that a normal person should have." After Elbert said when he poisoned the tea, Phil Coulson really believed it. At that moment, countless associations ran through his mind. He knew very well that if another agent, such as Barton or Natasha Romanoff, would not just pull out shot. It's impossible for Elbert not to understand this, but he still did it, and he did it so easily and freely. Phil Coulson didn't even see the muscles on his body tense at all. From the beginning to the end, Elbert's whole person was in a state of tension. A state of extreme relaxation. This is so suspicious. "Definitely. Phil Coulson, are you saying that there is a force behind Elbert that can support his self-confidence? Or that he has some means of predicting the future?" Nick Fury used the tablet on the table to bring up Elbert. He had read the resume many times before, but all the information was correct and there wasn't much worth exploring. Even the patent applied for by Elbert was well-founded and there were no problems with it. "Both are possible, but the former is unlikely." Phil Coulson did not answer immediately, but paused, and after thinking carefully, he said that there is a difference in self-confidence. Elbert's self-confidence is more like a kind of extreme self-identification. Self-confidence that can solve all problems. "Phil Coulson, do you know what you are talking about? Do you know what it means if he can really predict the future?" Nick Fury frowned and asked in a very stern tone. "If anyone can really know whatever happens in the future, he must not be allowed to appear out of sight of S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise, if he is used properly, it will be a huge wave that will cause a world-class catastrophe." "I understand the Director, but other than that, I cannot understand the meaning of his actions and emotions. He has not experienced any professional training, and his physique is at the level of an ordinary person. But facing such a person, I am afraid it's like a sheep seeing a prehistoric Tyrannosaurus Rex. Phil Coulson let go of his right hand that he had been holding tightly since getting in the car, and his nails had even left traces of blood on his palm, but if not, Phil Coulson he felt like he would be shaking all over and unable to speak a complete sentence. Only the pain could calm him down. Shortly after Phil Coulson left, the aftermath of Tony Stark's disappearance quickly subsided, and Stark Industries' stock price continued to rise. Everything was moving in the best direction, but beneath the surface calm, there were countless undercurrents. Tony and Obadiah, the uncle and nephew, began to have frequent contact and testing, and no one knew which one would bite the other's throat at the critical moment. Elbert's life has also returned to peace. He goes to Osborne Industrial twice a day to tease the poor guy Colin. He occasionally goes to the Imperial Cemetery to see how Raza, his younger brother, is doing. After all, he is one of his first subordinates, even if it's a bit minor, but if one day he is killed for no apparent reason, he will also be very sad. Since the last time, Norman seemed to have forgotten that there was such a person as him. He had no research tasks and had never talked to him. He only received salary and approved experimental applications. As long as the requirements were not excessive, everything was done. Green light all the way. And because Elbert's laboratory basically has no task pressure, Osborne Industries has become a place that everyone wants to work in. After all, you don't have to do any work, and you can still get a first-class salary, and the benefits are natural. Elbert also refused to accept anyone who came, and as a result, Norman's secretary personally came to clean up the people. Otherwise, other research departments may not even be able to find a few assistants if this continues. As for these employees who actively joined, Elbert made a note for them. When he takes power in the future, these will be the first batch to be dismissed. Those who are really motivated, who will break their heads and go to him who has no future, the senior care sector, is crowded. After paddling happily for more than 2 months, Elbert finally met Norman himself. Compared to a few months ago, he looked even more haggard. Retroproliferation was tormenting him more than he imagined. To be serious, this not only changed his appearance, but also caused a slight deviation in his personality. If you could still feel the warmth from Norman before, now when you see Norman, you will only feel a warmth, cold. Chairman, Mr. Collins said you were looking for me. What's the matter? Elbert observed Norman's condition and had to say that it was very bad. If it continued, Norman wouldn't even last a month. Definitely, my dear Dr. Elbert, I neglected you for my research before. Now that my research has been completed, I can have a chat with you. After all, you have been with Osborne Industries for so long, and I don't seem to have gotten to know you well. As soon as Norman opened his mouth, Elbert felt something was wrong. Logically speaking, a person who has been tortured by illness for a long time would have a naturally distorted voice. But Norman was not only full of energy, but also a bit sharp. Chairman, your matters are more important. I'm having a good time at Osborne Industries, so you don't have to worry. Has the experiment been successful? Elbert would not believe such nonsense, but he did not expect that Norman would be so impatient that he directly injected the original strength hormone without any optimization. Most of his haggardness did not come from the body, but from the mind, and he got rid of the genetic disease. He is still suffering from the huge side effects caused by the strength hormone. Oh, that's good, but I heard that someone recently said that you were dissatisfied with my arrangement. Not only did you not come to work for a long time, but you also had close contacts with several directors, Norman said with a smile on his face. But there is no hint of joy, but a kind of cruelty that can lead to murder at any time. The chairman has misunderstood. Director Carroll and I have only met twice, and there is absolutely no intention of being dissatisfied with you. As Norman's research time lengthened, not much good news came, and Osborne Industrials the directors became uneasy. Nowadays, Osborne Industries is desperate. Once the research fails, they may be in disaster. Especially after the news of Norman fainting in the laboratory was exposed several times, this uneasiness became more intense. After buying off the deputy director of the laboratory, the directors' faces became very ugly. Norman's physical condition was no longer enough to support long-term research, and now Osborne Industries could not find a candidate to replace him. It means that the failure of the experiment is only a matter of time. No one wanted to watch themselves lying in the coffin little by little, so while Norman was still fighting the disease and doing his best to study human strength hormones, they began to frequently contact some capitalists, hoping to take advantage of the current good Osborne stock price. Sell it for a good price. After learning about this situation, Elbert naturally would not let it go. Carroll was one of the major shareholders he contacted. Osborne Industries is much smaller than Stark Industries, with a market value of approximately $30 billion United States dollars, only 10% of Stark Industries, 1. And unlike Stark Industries, which is at its peak, Osborne is now in a precarious state. Even if the news has not yet spread, the stock price is still stable, but as an equity exchange, it is naturally impossible to be equivalent. Elbert used the 2% of Stark Industrial shares he had previously received to exchange a total of 30% of the shares from the directors headed by Carroll, which was already more than all other directors except Norman, the total number of shares in hand. With such a large proportion of shares, Elbert no longer cares about other directors. When he gets Norman's shares, he can absolutely control Osborne Industries without having to care about other people's opinions like Norman. But he didn't expect these directors to be so lax and let Norman hear the news. Looking at Norman's very playful eyes, Elbert was a little confused. If Norman attacked him directly in the office, should he fight back or kill him directly? This doesn't fit into his plan. So that's it. It seems that I misunderstood. Dr. Elbert, please go back first. I will go and talk to the directors. Norman didn't let Elbert struggle for long before he kicked him out and just turned around. At this time, Elbert clearly felt Norman's murderous intention. Luckily Norman is not crazy, otherwise I would have to fight back. With a sigh of relief, Elbert did not return to the laboratory, but left Osborne Industries directly. Based on what Norman said just now, he definitely couldn't bear the murderous intention and would take action tonight, but he didn't know whether he was going to deal with those directors or Elbert first. Stop, this is my body. Just after Elbert left, Norman in the office covered his head in pain and yelled angrily. Yes, this is your body, but it also belongs to me. Stop struggling and obey. Do you want to watch these guys who betrayed you live freely? The next second, Norman's face softened, and he said with a bewildered face. But, there was some hesitation on Norman's face, but soon another consciousness took over. But what? They are going to sell Osborne Industries. Think about it carefully. If the company is gone, where will you go to do research? You won't survive much longer with human strength hormone. But what about Harry? Are you going to inject him with this semi-finished product? No, I will never inject Harry with it. An expression of extreme disgust appeared on Norman's face. After learning that he was not going to die soon, Norman desperately injected the most primitive version of the strengthening hormone. It gave Norman the power of Superman, but it had some terrible side effects. Moreover, it could not completely cure the family's genetic disease. Even the two were mixed together, making Norman almost become a madman. His remaining sense told Norman that it was best to keep Harry away from this thing. Then take action. Tonight is a good opportunity. We must not lose Osborne Industries, otherwise you and Harry will be dead. The bewitching voice gradually disappeared, and when Norman opened his eyes again, there was only gone crazy. He is no longer Norman Osborne, but Green Goblin. Tonight, a sudden heavy rain broke the prosperity of New York. Even though modern civilization has been very developed, I believe that not many people will choose to go out in this kind of weather. Even the cameras at various intersections can't see through the rain curtain. The footage was captured clearly, so no one noticed that a man in weird clothes was riding a flight skateboard back and forth through the affluent areas of Manhattan. Whenever he falls, there will be a violent explosion, followed by a lot of crying and crazy laughter. This repeats, and when the police who receive the warning arrive, they can only clean up the mess on the ground. No shadow of the other party was seen. Moreover, the other party committed crimes without any pattern at all. One moment he appeared in the east, the next moment he appeared in the north, and even the next time he appeared 20 meters away from the victim in the East District. The police were completely confused. They were so close, why didn't he commit the crime together here, but instead returned here after committing the crime on the other side? The police officers were exhausted in the heavy rain that night, but often they could only see the ruins left behind by the explosion. Some young police officers were unwilling to draw their guns and shoot in the air, but little did they know that the criminal they wanted to arrest was in the middle of the night, lying in the corner, holding his stomach and wailing. Chairman, your taste is really not that good. This look is worse than a joker. Hearing the explosions one after another in the middle of the night, Elbert knew that Norman was taking action. This was exactly what he wanted, so he came to Norman's door. At that time, Elbert gave him a surprise. Ha! Ha! The violent breathing made Norman's physical pain lessen slightly and his mood calmed down. He turned to look at Elbert, who was fiddling with a pumpkin bomb. Norman's expression gradually changed. Bitterly, "I can't believe that you are actually a Superman. It seems you still have sense. How about we make a deal?" Elbert put down the pumpkin bomb in his hand, walked to Norman, squatted down and asked. "Trade? Ha 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 ha. I'm like this now. What else can be traded, and what can you come up with that's worth trading for me? My life? If you want it, just take it." After hearing this, Elbert Norman sneered. For him now, there are not many things worth caring about. "You definitely have a lot of things to trade. I need all the shares of Osborne Industries in your hands, as well as the design drawings of these gadgets." Elbert pointed to the pumpkin bombs and skateboards on the ground. The bombs were forgotten, but the Green Goblin skateboard, but good thing. Most speedsters have the same problem. Even if they can advance at super light speed, they can't achieve true flight. Only a few lucky people can use the changes in the speed force to achieve the purpose of flight. Elbert himself cannot fly, so the Green Goblin skateboard is very useful to him. "So you want these things? Yes, I can give them to you, but what can you give me? You can't give me anything." Norman still sneered. He should have seen Elbert's ambition a long time ago, but not now. Late, he wouldn't give Elbert anything, never. "You're right, I can't give you anything, but I can give Harry something." Elbert smiled. He never thought of threatening Norman. This would not be effective, and since it was a transaction, something would naturally need to be paid. In Norman's opinion, it was an extremely precious thing. "Harry? What do you want to do to Harry?" Hearing his son's name, Norman seemed to regain all his strength in an instant. He supported his strong arms on the ground and pounced on Elbert with the force of the rebound. However, the next moment he flew back at a faster speed. In front of Elbert, he didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. "Don't get excited. I won't hurt Harry. Our business belongs to us and it won't affect our family." Elbert held down Norman, who wanted to continue attacking, but the other party obviously didn't want to hear him continue talking and still struggled to stand. To get up, Elbert had to corner him and rip off Norman's sleeves. Different from the previous green spots, after the injection of human strength hormone, Norman's arm skin became keratinized. Although it was indeed cured to a certain extent, this keratinization was also spreading. Even if there were no other side effects, this reaction sooner or later it will kill Norman. "Watch it carefully, and then think about what I said." Elbert gave Norman a smile, and then the red arc flashed. Before Norman could react, the arc rushed into his arm crazily. And it quickly flowed through the body along the meridians and blood vessels, and the severe pain made Norman scream. This situation only lasted for 3 minutes. When everything subsided, Norman lay helplessly on the ground, looking at his arms in disbelief. The cuticle on them had completely fallen off, and the pain that had been accompanying him disappeared. For this moment, he had sacrificed so much that he could no longer bear it. After a long time, Norman raised his head and looked at Elbert. There was a fierce struggle in his heart, but with a sigh, he still chose to compromise. "Cure Harry, and I will give you what you want. It's a wise choice. I won't touch your personal assets. Sign it now." Satisfied, Elbert took out a prepared equity transfer contract and placed it in front of Norman. Norman took a deep look at Elbert, then signed his name and wrote down the password to his personal safe. After that, he ignored Elbert and walked directly to the side, taking off the clothes that Elbert had taken off before. After putting on the equipment, he got back on his skateboard and flew into the heavy rainy night sky. His revenge was not over yet. Before dawn, he would make those who betrayed him pay the price. After collecting the contract, Elbert did not stop Norman from leaving. Even though his genetic disease was cured, the injection of human strength hormones had completely depleted Norman's body. He would not live long. Elbert could use the destructive power of the Speed Force, directly destroying the bad information in his genetic genes and destroying the proliferating impurities would not replenish his vitality, and there was no need for him to do so. Watching Norman disappear in the heavy rain, Elbert suddenly felt a little melancholy. He wondered whether he had done something wrong, whether he should not be so unscrupulous for Osborne Industry. He found that he had changed. He was originally just a low-income man who could make ends meet, and now he has become a villain. "Maybe I was born to be a bad guy, at least this way I can survive." Norman is just the beginning. In order to survive, Elbert will only create one tragedy after another, heroes will bleed, and the world will fall. Elbert has no right to choose. Now he is a knife in the DC universe. He can only survive by completing his mission. As for what will happen after he completes his mission, who knows? Isn't that what people are like, struggling in the face of slim hope, unwilling to give up and move forward even if they are bruised and bruised. The only thing that is still hopeful is that the world is not human after all, and there will be no tragedies like the birds disappearing, the good bows hiding, the cunning rabbits dying, and the lackeys being cooked. The weak consciousness born in the instinct of the world does not have so many twists and turns. It only has the simplest principle. If it contributes to the world, it will be rewarded, and if it exceeds the world, it will be punished. Otherwise, if the world consciousness is stronger and can self-examine, then Elbert will. The moment he saw Tony Stark, he was already dead. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night. Some people have lost their lives, and some people have a lot of money. As the sun rises in the morning, it dissipates the chill brought by and turns into a drizzle of light rain. The residents of Manhattan were frightened last night. Although the heavy rain blocked a certain amount of sound, it was difficult for them not to hear the explosion caused by Green Goblin at such a close distance, and the police cars patrolling the entire Manhattan area almost all night showed the seriousness of the matter. Sex. Sergeant Lois went one by one to reassure these frightened residents, telling them not to worry and that the Manhattan Police Department would protect their safety. However, no matter how clever the reassurances were, they all seemed so insignificant in the face of the ruins that could be seen everywhere. The Green Goblin was too crazy. It flew around the entire Manhattan residential area in one night. No matter where you lived, you could always see the explosion debris not far away after opening the door. Damn it, don't let me know which bastard did it, or I'll put a bullet in his ass. Sergeant Blois' assistant cursed the guy who caused the sabotage, but the experienced sergeant could see it. When he came out, his old friend for many years was a little scared. The fear in his eyes could not be hidden from others. But he was not the only one who was afraid. Lois looked at the colleagues around him. Most of them had panic on their faces. How had they ever seen such a scene before? It looked like the wreckage after being bombarded by a howitzer. This was not them. They only wore what the police with .38 caliber pistols can handle. Is that they don't know that this is just the beginning. The curtain of the era has begun, and the wave that follows will smash the world to pieces. Yesterday morning, a large number of explosions occurred in Manhattan. Dozens of high-level buildings were affected, and there were hundreds of casualties. What caused this disaster? Look at these devastated houses. Can you believe this is happening in Manhattan? Where is the government to protect people? The biggest terrorist attack in history. Is war coming? The spokesperson of the Ministry of National Defense made a speech early this morning. He will never condone anyone related to this attack. Special departments have been involved in the investigation. The next day, newspapers, TV, and every news media were frantically reporting on the bombing that occurred in Manhattan yesterday. There was no way to hide this matter. The scope of damage caused by Green Goblin was too wide. If you want to, blocking news would require quarantining the entire residential area of Manhattan, which is clearly impossible. Therefore, with the speed of the reporter from the United States, which is comparable to that of a speedster, almost before the police chief had figured out how to submit his resignation letter to the superiors, the overwhelming reports flooded his office, and the pressure brought by it was so great that it almost overwhelmed him. This poor guy simply swallowed the gun himself. After all, it was better to go directly to see God than to stay with the criminals he had captured for the rest of his life. Remarkably, 2 agents claiming to be from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Bureau rescued the police chief and fully intervened in the investigation of the terrorist attack. Yes, this incident has been characterized as a well-planned terrorist attack against America, because anyone who sees the kind of destruction scene that completely destroys a house will not think that it was caused by just a few random people. To the fist-file-size pumpkin bomb, this is obviously a conspiracy that has been planned for many years by a well-hidden organization. As for why most of the victims are shareholders of Osborne Industries, is there any connection between this incident and Osborne Industries? No one has thought of this, or some people have made this issue a blind spot. After all, compared to a terrorist attack, the danger comes from internal topics, which are more likely to cause people to panic. Definitely, this incident has nothing to do with Osborne Industries on the surface, but secretly, a series of departments, including S.H.I.E.L.D., have extended their tentacles into Osborne Industries. The impact of this attack is so bad. It is not only a fishing boat for the people, but more importantly, it is a complaint from Manhattan residents. Unlike ordinary people, Those who can buy a house in Manhattan must be at least a millionaire. One day, such a group of people suddenly discovered that the government's so-called security guarantees were just like paper. Their anger reached at its peak. Countless complaints of dissatisfaction have already filled the government's mailboxes. If they cannot get a satisfactory answer, America's tax revenue may suffer this year. Therefore, Congress urgently needed an explanation. It happened that the status of decedent gave them a good investigation gap. After a little investigation, they found out about the directors of Osborne Industries who were selling their stocks aggressively. Soon the matter became clear before their eyes. Obviously, it was Norman Osborne, the chairman of Osborne Industries, who was dissatisfied with the director's betrayal and planned this horrific murder. Needless to say, all kinds of monsters gathered at Norman's doorstep, wanting to be the first to kill him. Catching Norman, a heinous gangster, is definitely an opportunity to rise to prominence. But as soon as they opened the door, they were all stunned. Norman was dead. Last night, Norman's family hereditary disease broke out. He survived until this morning and passed away before the ambulance came, leaving only his only son Harry, who was still in junior high school. So the detectives, who had made a futile effort, looked as depressed as if they had eaten a mouthful of shit. They wanted to find evidence of Norman's crime, but in the eyes of the excited capitalists in Manhattan, they had to investigate a man who died of illness. Capitalists are undoubtedly seeking death. Regardless of whether Norman did this or not, if the problem is thrown at Norman now, then it will obviously be regarded by the group of capitalists as the government's perfunctory treatment of them, and that the shit basin will be detained without any investigation. Norman, the dead man, would not only dissatisfy them, but even anger them, making it even more difficult to end it. If this incident had happened in a slum, or as in the original movie, within a small area of the fair, it might not be as difficult to deal with as it is now, but it happened in Manhattan, directly threatening most of the rich. Safety. Without the support of these capitalists, let alone the president, the entire government system is in danger of collapse. They can ignore the vast majority of capitalists, but they dare not challenge the anger of the entire capital system. During this period, the whole of Manhattan, and even New York, was turned upside down. Each resident was interrogated an average of 3 times a day. Those with criminal records and some guys with less than clean foundations became like salesmen, constantly being questioned. Check and pay attention. Although not much useful information has been obtained, the public security environment in New York and several nearby cities is quite clear. Even in the dark alleys at midnight, no gangster dares to go for a stroll, for fear that he will be imprisoned the next moment. He caught the man who ran away and threw him into the police station. Due to the pressure from the top, some violent methods in the police department were lifted. Once caught, they will be regarded as a model of not letting go of the wrongdoer. Don't think about it without peeling off a layer of skin. For a time, New York, everyone in the surrounding gang-related forces is in danger and dare not show their faces at all. At Norman's funeral, only a few acquaintances were paying their respects. The entire Manhattan area seemed to have entered a state of mourning in the past few days. There were multiple funerals to be held every day, and many people were tired. Harry, my condolences. Elbert placed the white roses he brought in front of the portrait, turned to look at the man with a sad face but holding back tears, and touched his head. Are you Uncle Elbert? Harry's body stiffened. It was obvious that he didn't like others touching his head, but he did not avoid it. Instead, he asked, "Thank you. Father told me before he left that you gave him a lot of help. Big help." "Really, I only did some trivial things." Hearing Harry's words, Elbert was slightly startled, and then realized that this was Norman paving the way for him. Even though he had a strong hatred for Elbert, Norman knew that if Harry showed his hatred in front of him, he would most likely die, so he chose to conceal the truth and portray Elbert as a man who tried his best to help him. People, and may also have instilled in Harry the idea of trusting Elbert. With these, Harry will not be opposed to Elbert, and his safety is guaranteed. And Elbert really needs Harry. Norman sees it very clearly. After he completes the attack, Osborne Industries is bound to become the target of public criticism. If Elbert directly takes out Norman's equity, he will definitely be listed as the #1 suspect. After all, Norman, both the director and the director, are dead. As the ultimate beneficiary, Elbert has a hard time avoiding suspicion. But it's different with Harry. As long as Harry cooperates, he can completely announce that he has inherited his father's inheritance, and because he is too young, he supports Elbert, the second largest shareholder, to take charge of Osborne Industries. This is one of the few invisible things. After all, the other shares in Elbert's hands had files before the incident, and they were clear and visible to the public, and they were not afraid of any investigation. In this way, the result will not change, but Elbert will avoid the trouble of being investigated, and Harry will not be targeted by Elbert. Even because of his identity, he has to protect Harry from harm. Otherwise the fishing boat may become in order to embezzle the company. The second largest shareholder of Osborne Industries hired a murderer to kill the orphan of the former chairman. Norman believed that this was not what Elbert wanted to see, so Harry was safe. "You are so humble. Dad told me that if it weren't for you, he might have died a few months ago. Thank you very much." Harry bowed deeply to Elbert. A few nights ago, Norman was full of. He returned home with a pale face, woke up Harry who was still sleeping, and told Harry that he was going to die. At that moment, Harry felt as if his world was about to collapse. Later, Norman talked to him a lot, saying how much he loved Harry. His indifference was just to make Harry better. He stayed away from home all year round to solve the family's genetic disease. Now he is suffering from the disease. He was going to die, and he didn't want Harry to die either. Harry remembered crying. This was the first time in his life that Norman had confided in him, but he would never see Norman again. Then Harry learned Elbert's name from Norman. Norman told him that Elbert would be the only person he could rely on, and he should not trust anyone else, especially those distant cousins who seemed kind. Norman talked a lot until the morning star rose in the sky, and he bid farewell to this world completely. Harry lay on Norman's body and cried bitterly, saying that he would never disobey any of his requests again, but Norman could not hear it. "Harry, good boy, I will take good care of you for Mr. Norman." Elbert did not continue to defend himself. He knew that in Norman's description, he had become Harry's new pillar of support. If he rejected him, then Harry would it may go to the extreme, like the Harry in the comics, becoming an addict and entering the grave of life on the road of depravity. "Father asked me to listen to you." Harry had no objection to this. Norman had arranged everything before his death, and Harry chose to follow his last wish. After Norman's funeral, Osborne Industries was anxiously waiting to welcome a new chairman. With Harry's support, Elbert succeeded in becoming the helmsman of Osborne Industries with an absolute advantage, and no other shareholders could restrict him. Subsequently, a group of old employees were laid off, and more young people entered Osborne Industries. Many people think that Elbert is so eager to clean up his predecessor's team that it is a bit unkind. Even based on the polymer materials previously invented by Elbert, Osborne Industries is likely to change its business direction in his hands, from biotechnology to materials technology. Few people are worried. There are not many biotechnology companies, because once the research reaches a certain level, it may involve some ethical issues, so it is difficult for ordinary people to get involved. There is still room for survival in this industry in America, but materials science is different, so let's not mention it. There are many high-end, mid-range and low-end companies. If Osborne Industries steps in, judging from Elbert's previous results, life for many people will be difficult. But soon they no longer worried. Elbert attended the press conference and stated that Osborne Industries would not change its business direction. He would inherit the legacy of former chairman Norman Osborne and continue to tackle biotechnology. After the press conference, he met with the military Fang's representative, General Duncan, and the two sides had friendly negotiations. Since then, Elbert's first small goal has been completed. The next step is to see how to stir up the situation and make the world different because of him. "Tuk tuk. Please come in." Elbert heard someone knocking on the door outside and said without raising his head, "Osborne Industries has undergone a major change. All things need to be adjusted. Before the responsibilities of each department are clearly defined, many things require Elbert's personal intervention. So he is still quite busy now, but it will get better after a while. Some initial confusion is normal." "Hello, Chairman Elbert, I am." The other party opened the door and walked into Elbert's office. A gentle voice sounded to him. Elbert looked up and looked at the middle-aged man with glasses approaching. The other party was a gentle scholar. Temperament, but many people will feel a pity when they first see him, because such a gentle person has lost something very important to many people, and there is nothing under his right sleeve. Dr. Curtis Connors, one of the leading authorities in the field of genetic reptiles, I am very glad that you can join Osborne Industries. Elbert took the initiative to stand up and shake hands with Connors. This is one of the few people who are willing to join Osborne Industries and are worthy of their reputation. As an authoritative scientist, after all, Elbert has not established enough prestige, and many scientists who have received invitations have chosen to continue to wait and see. The conditions proposed by Osborne Industries are very generous, and I really need a place to conduct my research. I am very grateful that you allow me to continue research in my field, instead of letting me handle slicing work like other companies. Speaking of his previous experience, Connors was a little helpless. There were not many big companies in the biological field, so it was difficult to find one that suited him. He was not a rich man himself, so he could not afford research expenses. This is definitely true. I firmly believe that it is best to make the best use of everything. Doctor, you should do what you are best at instead of wasting time on trivial matters. Connors, or the future Dr. Lizardman. He does have considerable talent. Speaking of which, his research results are of the same type as Norman's. They both have effects, but the side effects are equally obvious. When I heard you say that, it seems that I did not make the wrong choice, Connors said happily. He was a little nervous before, but now Elbert's words are undoubtedly a shot in the arm. This is the approval document regarding the establishment of a laboratory. Sign your name on it, Dr. Connors, and you can go to the research department to select assistants. Now Osborne doesn't have many things. It just has many people. Elbert handed an authorization document to Connors. During this period, Osborne recruited a large number of people. Although there were only a few top doctors, there were enough researchers at the grassroots level. Even though some of them may be mixed, I believe they will be there soon. Eliminate those who are not qualified. Connors signed the contract with some excitement, and then went to visit his future laboratory under the guidance of his secretary. Elbert was a little worried. Norman was dead, but his research could not stop. This was a collaboration with the military. The basis is that just the huge amounts of side effects of the original potion won't satisfy them. But the problem is that Elbert can't find anyone who can replace Norman to lead the research. Several PhDs he's optimistic about have either joined other companies or declined his invitation. He probably won't be able to find a suitable candidate in a short time. People. Miss Caroline, help me pay attention to a company called Pioneer Technology. The founder is Alderez Killian. It is also a biotechnology company and may also be involved in the military industry. Picked up the phone in the office, Elbert thought of a solution to the problem. Speaking of human body strengthening, we have to mention Extremis in the movie. Although it has extremely high requirements for the recipient, once the injection fails, the human body will instantly turn into a high explosive bomb. But there is no doubt that compared to Noxman's human strength hormone, Extremis is undoubtedly more powerful. Perhaps if he can acquire Pioneer technology, Elbert will have a way to solve the problem, or even combine the two to create a more effective product, and as one of Iron Man's stumbling blocks, Alderazi Killian is also what Elbert needs. If the goal can be solved with money, that would be great. If it is not possible, then you have to find another way. Okay, Chairman, if I find anything, I will contact you as soon as possible. The beautiful secretary with long blonde hair replied seriously. As Elbert's new secretary, Caroline has her own pride, and she is also very grateful to Elbert for giving her such an opportunity. So no matter how trivial it is, she will try her best to handle it. The reason why Elbert is not overwhelmed by documents is due to Caroline's ability. After making the call, Elbert leaned back in his chair. It was not that he was tired from dealing with Osborne Industries, but that he needed to adapt to the changes in the Speed Force, whether it was the Empire Cemetery or the attack on Manhattan, or Osborne. The change of ownership of the industry brought greater strength to Elbert. If someone can keep up with Elbert's speed, they will find that his body occasionally flickers and blurs for a moment after lying down. This is the high-speed afterimage produced when he cannot control his speed. Although it does not have much impact on normal life, but Elbert discovered that this sudden increase in strength without any training is likely to have an impact on the future if he is not properly adapted to it. It will even turn into an uncontrollable mountain. He used the Speed Force to move forward, but the Speed Force pushed him forward. One day, the mountain became too big, and Elbert couldn't adapt to its push. He might be smashed to death by it, so now he spends some time every day sorting it out, but today it took a little longer. Elbert opened his eyes with some confusion, only to find that his office had undergone a strong distortion at some point. It was not a destructive distortion, but a shift in space, just like inside a rotating Rubik's Cube. The transformation is the same. The moment he realized what had happened, the deflection of space had been completed. All the lines were connected together and collapsed towards the same point. Finally, a circular passage was formed, with a portal with a ring of fire at the end. Is this an invitation to me? We'll meet sooner or later, so let's talk now. Looking at the sealed space, Elbert walked towards the only way out and crossed the space door. Hello, I am the magician Ancient One, and I take the liberty to invite you. In the luxuriously decorated room, Elbert saw a woman wearing a white robe with no hair. The simple dress gave her a unique look. Oppressive force and various mysterious energies surrounded her. It was the aura of magic that acted on her in a way that ordinary people could not understand. If you knew it was presumptuous, you shouldn't have invited me like this, powerful magician. Is there anything you need me to do? When Elbert entered the room, the space door behind him closed automatically. Elbert didn't care much about this. If the Ancient One didn't want to let him through, and there was no use leaving the door open. You have a very powerful power in your body, young man, but you seem to be unable to completely control it. This is very dangerous. The Ancient One's gaze seemed to penetrate Elbert's body and reach his root essence. For a moment, Elbert he felt that he was standing naked in front of the Ancient One, and any disguise would be of no use to him. Magician, you are even more rude. Although you are very powerful, peeking into privacy without consent is not a commendable thing. Fortunately, this feeling only lasted for a moment, and the next moment Elbert's body surface flashed a red arc of electricity was an instinctive reaction of the speed force. It even wanted to break away from Elbert's control and rush towards the Ancient One in front of her, as if there was something she needed to get. There is indeed something she must get, but not now. Elbert has restrained the speed force that is about to break out of his body. What is worth mentioning is that although the speed force in Elbert's body has increased rapidly in a short period of time, he has no control over the speed force. The constrained ability has also been enhanced. It is as if his authority is getting closer to the speed force, and he has been able to initially restrain it. As long as the speed force does not exceed his limit too much, this controllability will be infinitely close to the peak, like an arm using a finger. I apologize for this, but the power in your body is more dangerous than I imagined. Ancient One apologized without sincerity, and then looked at Elbert more intently, as if he wanted to see through his essence again, but unfortunately she failed this time. That's my business, and I'm confident that I can restrain it. If magician is all you want, I don't think we have anything to talk about. Elbert's face turned ugly, and he turned around and looked around the room. The exit, but unfortunately he didn't even see a window. It was obvious that the Ancient One did not intend to let him leave until the outcome of the conversation came out. No, my point of view is exactly the opposite. It's best not to leave here until you learn to control your power. Ancient One shook her head and said solemnly, but her words did not mean the slightest bit of advice. You want to imprison me? Elbert's eyes gradually became dangerous. He thought the Ancient One came to him just for a nutritious chicken soup discussion, but he didn't expect that she would not play cards according to the rules as soon as she came up. As one of the few people on the Blue Star who can pose a threat to Elbert, the Ancient One has always been something he is afraid of. He does not want to confront the Ancient One unless it is absolutely necessary, but now it seems that the Ancient One has a very tough attitude. If Elbert does not stay, the war will break out sooner or later. No, I'm just teaching you how to control your own power. Perhaps feeling Elbert's anger, the Ancient One raised her eyebrows slightly, and the magical movement covered her with an invisible armor. Is there any difference? I don't want to stay here. Elbert didn't know why Ancient One had to stay by himself. After all, he was not the only one with special powers. He had never seen Ancient One have any record of forcibly retaining people, or what did Ancient One see? This is not impossible. It is said that the Ancient One is connected to eternity, one of the 5 gods. It is not difficult to understand what she knows. It seems that I need to use some special means. Don't blame me, child. I am doing it for your own good. The Ancient One took a deep look at Elbert, and then her whole body sank into the ripples of space. The next moment she appearing behind Elbert, the magic blade slashed towards the back of Elbert's neck. Although he did not feel the killing intent, Elbert didn't want to be slashed, so he moved. Invisible ripples rippled in the space. This was the first time Elbert ran after gaining strength. The red lightning only stayed in place. There was only a moment of thought, and then Ancient One was hit hard on the bookshelf behind it as if it was hit by a heavy hammer. Unexpected speed, but not enough. Elbert did not stop running because he knew very well that just one attack would not cause any harm to Ancient One. He even felt that if Ancient One wanted to, she could even dodge that attack. After an attack, sure enough, the Ancient One's voice reached his ears as usual. "It's hard for me to keep up with your speed, but I can slow you down. Kid, don't underestimate a magician." The next moment, the space changes. He sits on the ground and travels 80,000 miles a day. Thousands of sonic speeds are in vain. The entire space flows backwards behind Elbert at an incredible speed. In one breath, he should have run tens of kilometers, but in fact, his footsteps standing still, Ancient One's blade was already close in front of her eyes. With a wave of her hand, the blade turned into a whip of light and wrapped around Elbert, trying to capture him first. "No, I have never underestimated you, Ancient One magician." Seeing that the light whip was about to wrap around his body, Elbert's eyes remained unmoved. What he hated most about the Ancient One was this ability to force space in the opposite direction of Elbert's running. Moving forward directly destroyed his super speed, but this did not mean that Elbert was powerless to resist. The red lightning burst out instantly, and the Ancient One's expression suddenly changed. He wanted to retract the light whip, but he couldn't keep up with the speed of the red lightning. The next moment, the space barrier shattered, and Elbert had already crossed the range of the light whip, but he didn't stop, taking advantage of the moment when Ancient One's old power was exhausted and new power was not yet generated. Elbert's red lightning scraped everything in the room. A large number of burned formations were activated for a while, but they soon exploded. It seemed like there was a fireworks show, which was really beautiful. After destroying all the magic circles in the room, Elbert stopped and looked at Ancient One. Her expression finally changed, but she still didn't say anything. As she waved her hand, the space flowed backwards again, and countless different things appeared. The protrusion of the rule blocks the space around Elbert. How long can you hold on? Faced with this more dangerous situation, Elbert was not worried at all. Ancient One is very powerful, but to achieve the purpose of limiting his speed, it takes more than 1 or 2 points of magic power. Even if Ancient One can absorb the energy of the dark dimension, it cannot be done casually. Therefore, if you want to punish Elbert, it is necessary to have an auxiliary magic circle fixed in the room. This can greatly reduce the pressure on Ancient One. But now that the magic circle has been destroyed, Ancient One must rely on its own strength if it wants to continue fighting. Elbert knew very well that even if Ancient One had a rich reserve of magic power, it would not last long. It's been long enough. Your speed is dangerous, but for a magician, speed sometimes doesn't cause trouble. Elbert was silent. This is true for a magician like Ancient One. She doesn't even need anything to cast a spell. In the process, if the opponent is replaced by Doctor Strange, Elbert is sure to send him to see God before he casts the spell, but Ancient One is different. This is the gap. So the ensuing battle fell into a cycle. The Ancient One consumed magic power to create a space corridor to obliterate Elbert's speed. However, before her attack arrived, Elbert's speed force had already destroyed the power of the fixed space, and so on. The two seemed to be at a stalemate, but at the same time they both knew that the other party had other methods that they had not used, especially Ancient One. Until now, she had not used a fatal attack. She did not seem to want to kill Elbert. She was just like her, as he said. Elbert should be kept here to teach him how to control his power. This battle gradually became boring. If it weren't for the butcher's knife hanging above his head that would be smashed down when the time comes, Elbert really wanted to stay, but unfortunately time did not allow it. Who knew the Ancient One wanted to keep him? How long, maybe a month or two, doesn't matter. In a year or two, Elbert will be ready to collect the body. Zzz, the electric light jumped, and Elbert once again broke away from the shackles of the Ancient One. But this time he did not stop, but continued to run towards the Ancient One. The speed force gathered in his hands. Now that the Ancient One has made up his mind, then you can only use enough power to threaten her. Give up, kid, you can't attack me. Seeing Elbert rushing over at high speed, the Ancient One shook his head, and suddenly a sense of space confusion came, and everything in front of him turned into illusory and invisible things, and they escaped. It has entered another dimension, and ordinary attacks cannot cause damage to it at all. This is not necessarily the case. Ancient One magician, one last warning, let me go. Standing one step ahead of the space chaos, Elbert's expression was unprecedentedly serious. What does time and space mean in front of the speed force? Elbert doesn't yet have the ability to transcend time, and space is also a constraint for him, but for the original speed force, neither is enough, so. Speed force extreme spear. The Speed Force was controlled and transformed into an entity. Before, Elbert could control the Speed Force to leave the body and attack, but now, he has been able to fix it into a certain form. This blow will do nothing. Unbreakable, Ancient One. I declare that this strike will penetrate everything. No matter when or where you are, choose. At this moment, the Speed Force was like the mighty thunder of heaven, which made Ancient One's expression change. Her expression also showed a horrified change for the first time. At first, she didn't think Elbert could pose any threat to her, but now she knew, I was wrong. A vague sense of death touched her spiritual sense. There was no doubt that if Elbert had shot that shot, she would die. No matter where she is hiding, even if she uses the Eye of Agamotto to reverse time, she cannot change the fact that she was hit. In all known and unknown time and space, her existence has been locked by the ultimate gun in Elbert's hand. Must die. So the Ancient One is silent. Is it necessary to fight Elbert to the death because of this? Yes, and no. Previously, she thought Elbert was just a young man who had mastered dangerous abilities, but now her evaluation of Elbert has risen enough to threaten the existence of Blue Star. Not everyone can ignore the advantage of speed like her. But Ancient One doesn't want to fight to the death with Elbert here, because she has far more enemies than just one Elbert. If it was just a trauma, the Ancient One would definitely choose to continue without any hesitation. Even if Elbert could not be changed, it could eliminate a hidden danger for Blue Star. But if it was death, the Ancient One was not afraid of death. She had lived long enough. But once she dies, those beings that were blocked by her will come out, and Blue Star may not survive again. You can leave. I hope you don't use this power to do anything else. Otherwise, even if you can kill me, I can also kill you. Ancient One opened the space door, but she still chose to compromise. In order to protect Blue Star, she had compromised many times and even actively absorbed the power of the dark dimension, so this was not too difficult for her to accept. Definitely, Ancient One magician, before this, I didn't cause any large-scale damage, right? Seeing the Ancient One's compromise, Elbert took back the Speed Force with satisfaction, and replied obediently. The Ancient One did not comment on this, watched him return to the office of Osborne Industries. It was so dangerous this time. We almost died together. After returning to his office, Elbert lay on the armchair with an exhausted expression. He and Ancient One had been facing each other in the cyclic space for who knows how long. In that kind of it was as if he had returned to the previous second, and the concept of time was a bit blurry, but Elbert knew that he did not have much physical strength left. If the time went on, he might not even be able to get the ultimate weapon. Fortunately, the Speed Force is indeed powerful enough. If that blow is fired, it will directly penetrate time and space and crucify Ancient One. This is his strongest method now. If it is ineffective, he can only declare surrender and wait for death. Fortunately, Ancient One's her sense of responsibility is as strong as Elbert expected. In order to protect her, she will choose to compromise, even if it may lead to the return of the tiger. After this stop, Elbert decided to be more low-key, at least not to do everything by himself. Otherwise the Ancient One would be really pressed for help. Elbert really had no good way to deal with it. He could kill the Ancient One, but as the Ancient One said just like that, there are also many ways to kill Elbert. The simplest one is that Ancient One can directly open an ultra-long-distance space door and send Elbert directly to outer space. Or even go to the extreme and throw him into a fixed star or a black hole. He will finish the game in minutes. No matter how powerful the speedster is, one basic thing cannot be changed. They are all human beings and possess most of the weaknesses of human beings. It's just that under normal circumstances, ordinary methods will not work against speedsters, but Ancient One definitely has ways to target these weaknesses. In the same way, other powerful spellcasters may also threaten Elbert, as long as they can be faster than Elbert. But it's a little weird that the Ancient One came to me. She's not such a nosy guy. Elbert chewed a few chocolate energy bars to regain his strength, touched the bar and thought about the problem. Ancient One, as the Sorcerer Supreme and the Asgardian of Blue Star, usually pays little attention to the internal disputes of Blue Star. As long as she is not preparing for a nuclear war to destroy the world, she basically ignores it. Even if she discovers that Elbert has powers that she does not recognize, she will not pay attention to them. She shouldn't be so forceful to keep him. There are so many weird powers on Blue Star. If Ancient One takes care of everything, how will she have the time to protect Blue Star? But to say that the Ancient One knows the Speed Force, then I am afraid that even death can't stop the Ancient One from wanting to kill him. What's more, from the beginning to the end, Elbert didn't feel the Ancient One's murderous intention. This matter is revealed. Looks a bit weird. Click. Just as Elbert was thinking, the door of the office was opened from the outside. Looking at Elbert sitting on the chair, Caroline was obviously stunned for a moment. "Chairman, you are still here. I came here 2 days ago. I didn't see you for the first time, so I thought you had left." "Oh, really? I went out just now. What's the matter?" Elbert looked at the watch on his wrist. Almost 5 hours had passed since he left. No wonder Caroline felt that he had left. "Yes, Chairman, I have found the pioneer technology you mentioned." Caroline, who acted very efficiently, was stunned for a moment before coming back to her senses. She ably took out a printed document and placed it on Elbert's desk. "So fast?" Elbert raised his eyebrows. Pioneer technology should be unknown now. Before Extremis was successfully developed, no one was optimistic about Killian's plan. "It's like this. In the process of repurchasing the shares of deceased directors, there were many people competing with us, including Pioneer Technology. However, due to lack of financial resources, they quickly withdrew from the competition." Caroline's the answer made Elbert nod his head clearly. The feeling was that Pioneer Technology had bumped into him. Killian really had a big heart. He dared to take advantage of it at this time. Does Pioneer Technology have sufficient research funds? There is not much information about Pioneer Technology. As Elbert thought, it is not well known among similar companies. Although it is also involved in some military industries, it is basically Hammer Industries without military support. It wants products but has no products. If there are no channels, even though the profits of the military industry are there, they can still make money, but no one regards them as individuals. Secondly, there is no information about Extremis in Pioneer Technology's information, and similar biotechnologies are not indicated. It seems that Killian did not mean to put these on the surface, but think about it, he was a fan of Tony Stark back then. Brother, in the end, he was forced to let go by Tony, and the cool breeze blew on the roof all night, and he wanted to die. He would definitely not expose this kind of thing openly, but would hold back his energy. First he perfected the desperate potion, and then he became a blockbuster. Just like in the movie, he made big news as soon as he showed up. "Chairman, do you want to send someone to contact Pioneer Technology?" Caroline asked aloud as Elbert covered the information. "No, no need. I'm going to directly acquire Pioneer Technology." Elbert immediately made up his mind. Pioneer Technology's market value is quite low compared to Osborne Industries, so it would be better to just swallow the cooperation. After all, Osborne Industry is inherited from the Norman family. Although it declined in the middle, Norman pulled it back and is still thriving. Pioneer Technology was established in less than 10 years. While it has no major products, it also has to expand its market share. A sum of money was used to research Extremis, so it's surprising that the market value is so high. While Elbert was planning to take over Pioneer Technology, the internal conflicts in Stark Industries were intensifying. Now it was almost coming to an end. Ever since he knew that Obadiah wanted to kill him, Tony had not been out alone, and use your own advantages to win over a large number of shareholders. Since Obadiah wants to get Stark Industries, Tony will clear him out first. In less than 3 months, Obadiah's power in Stark Industries has been squeezed to the extreme. If he didn't also own a large number of shares, he might not even be able to get in now. "Mr. Obadiah, this is today's document." Daniel's hands were trembling a little. These days, he had seen with his own eyes how Obadi fell from the clouds to the bottom, so he also knew that there was no expression on Obadi's face. There was so much terrifying anger hidden underneath. He was afraid that Obadiah would suddenly burst out and send him to hell. "Put it on the table and you can go out." Obadiah turned his back to Daniel and looked at the traffic outside the building, saying lifelessly, "Yes, yes." Daniel felt like he was amnesty. He didn't dare to stay any longer and trotted out of the office. He met the HR manager within 2 steps. Daniel quickly walked over and whispered. Obadiah still didn't say anything, just "it's like giving up." "Well done, continue to report on Obadiah's daily situation, and Mr. Stark will give you the due reward." The HR manager patted Daniel on the shoulder and encouraged him, but Daniel just smiled. Even if he did, although he was an informant, he would not have any chance to turn around in the future. At most, he would be transferred to a remote department and spend the rest of his life living as a fool. The HR manager was not in the mood to pay attention to Daniel's mood. He walked around in circles twice before picking up the phone and dialing. "Mr. Stark, We have tried our best to squeeze out Obadiah as you requested, but he seems to I don't care at all. I suspect he may take some abnormal measures, so you must be careful. Got it. Tony closed the phone, but did not think about Obadiah's question. Instead, he looked at the exquisite and complex robotic arm in front of him and made final adjustments. Jarvis, has the compatibility been adjusted? Yes, sir, after 13,000 correction experiments, the Mark I has been debugged. Very well, let's start getting dressed. Tony walked up to the round stage in the center of the room very excitedly. With the sound of a mechanical combination, the Jarvis remote-controlled robotic arm began to put parts on Tony's body one by one, just like putting on clothes. Various parts and iron pieces were placed on every part of Tony by Jarvis in the most fitting way. Everything was completed in just a few seconds. As the last cold mask fell, Tony had completed the transformation. From now on, he became Iron Man. No, it should be said that he had everything of Iron Man except his heart. He is still the same Stark, and his hatred for Obadiah makes him ignore some things. Once the hatred disappears, he may turn back to the playboy at any time, even if he has made a steel battle suit. Open the skylight and conduct a flight test. Tony's voice was heard through the steel. Although this was completely unnecessary, Jarvis could complete his orders through the built-in microphone, but Tony even added a certain speaker to it. Because it's cool, Tony Stark's original words. Sir, I must remind you that although the test results are very good, I still do not recommend going directly to high altitude for the first test flight. For your safety, we should start with a low-altitude flight. There is no need for low-altitude testing. I am Tony Stark, the greatest genius of this century. I believe in my work. It is perfect. Now, open the skylight. Tony stroked the breastplate full of science fiction atmosphere, but it could be used as his when his steel fingers touched the reactor on his chest. His face turned ferocious for a moment. Yes, sir. Jarvis, unable to resist Tony's command, opened the panoramic sunroof. Tony turned on the jetting devices on the soles of his feet and the palms of his hands. After adapting to the balance while hovering half a meter above the ground, he suddenly increased the push force, and suddenly the powerful power provided by nuclear energy pushed him high into the sky. The energy output level is normal and the pressure is normal. Sir, it is recommended to increase the right-wing jet power by 0.3%. This will help you maintain balance. Very good, continue to monitor everything and remind me if there are any problems. Tony increased the jet power of the right wing according to the improvement of Jarvis. Suddenly, the steel battlesuit, which was still a little crooked, flew in a straight line towards the sea. Start taking off and check the pressure of each part. After Tony Stark crossed the horizontal plane, he quickly began to rise, 100 meters, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. As the distance increased, there was a certain shapeshifting in the parts of each part of the battlesuit, but they were all within a tolerable range. But as he continued to pull up, Tony discovered a very serious problem. Water droplets began to condense on the surface of the battlesuit, and quickly condensed into ice. Seeing this, Tony Stark not only did not stop, but accelerated upward. He wanted to see where the limits are. Sir, if this continues, the body will be frozen. I know, prepare backup energy for me. Be ready to heat the surface of the body and restart the system at any time. When it climbed to the extreme height, the steel battlesuit had been frozen into a pile and began to fall back quickly, but at this moment, the surface of the battlesuit began to heat up, and through the heating of the backup energy, the ice began to melt. Soon Tony regained control of the battlesuit, opening his arms to the sun, as if embracing the world. Thanks to the new insulation material provided by Osborne Industries, the battlesuit is finally completed. In the office, Obadiah unconsciously opened and closed the flip top of the lighter repeatedly in his hand. This was a gift given to him by Tony a few years ago, St. DuPont. Its biggest feature is that the sound of opening and closing it is quite clear and sweet. Turning the office chair in a circle on his tiptoes, Obadiah looked at the documents on the table that Daniel had just sent over. There were only 3 thin copies. Without looking at Obadiah, he knew that there were only some insignificant things on them. There are mountains of documents on his desk, which is trouble and a symbol of power. Now that he is in decline in Stark Industries, the people who are still willing to follow him are like a few documents. Daniel is working for Tony. Obadiah knows this very well, but he does not have an attack because it is meaningless. Meaning, if he can't bring down Tony, all his actions will have no effect. Obadiah always believed that he was the core of Stark Industries and that he was the most important person. But when Tony launched a counterattack, he realized that he was terribly wrong. Even though Tony had never managed the company, those directors still did not. The slightest bit of hesitation was on Tony's side. Obadiah might be able to use interests to unite the directors to restrain Tony. But once Tony revealed his absolute hostility to Obadiah, the whole situation changed. Because Tony Stark was the core of that interest, and now Tony has no idea of closing the weapons department, and the conflict with the directors is even smaller. And Obadiah? He is indeed a very good president, but that's it. There are many candidates who can replace him, and it is in the interest of all directors to kick him out. Tony is a playboy and will not spend too much time managing the company. With Obadiah, they can arrange for their own people to enter the company at the right time and reap benefits for themselves. Tony, why can't you disappear? I gave you many opportunities, but you pushed me into a blind corner. Obadiah slammed the metal cover of the lighter, and huge amounts of force even caused cracks in the connection. But no one knew that Obadiah, who looked quite bloated, actually had such strength. Dee. The mobile phone in his pocket rang rapidly. Obadiah picked it up, glanced at the number, and answered the call. Mr. Obadiah, everything is ready and you can start at any time. Very well, let's get started. I don't want any accidents to happen. After saying that, Obadiah hung up the communication. His men were easily solved by Elbert in the Imperial Cemetery, but he still had money, and it was a sufficient sum. Huge funds, and there are many people in this world who are willing to do anything for money. At first, Obadiah never thought of killing Tony like this, but he had no choice. Raza's backstab made him lose almost everything. Thinking of Raza, Obadiah's hand tightened, and the metal-cased lighter began to make an overwhelming sound. But this could not calm his anger. If it hadn't been for him, he would not have fallen to where he is today. If you let him know where Raza is, he will definitely understand what hell is. Just as Obadiah hung up the phone, on the other side, a group of gangsters wearing body armor, equipped with submachine guns and even rocket launchers in 2 helicopters had approached Tony's villa. Killian could still find someone to attack here, but Obadiah didn't. No reason can be found, and even based on the weapons and equipment of Stark Industries, this group of people is even more ferocious. Cast, observe the reaction of life in the villa. Others are ready to take aim. After receiving the order from the employer, Captain Aston ordered everyone to start taking action. This is the largest order they have received so far, and they may all, even if they die, their families will live a truly rich life, so each of them will use their lives to complete the task. Boss, there is no life response. Cast put on the goggles provided by Obadiah and locked the mansion in front of him through the satellite password. However, the results of the thermal analysis showed that there was no life response in this huge residence. How is it possible? Where did Tony Stark go? According to the intelligence, he should not have gone out today. Aston quickly looked through the information provided by his employer and the travel records before they came, but they did not find Tony Stark leaving. Record of. Is it possible that a counter-detection system is installed here? Hey, sir, I don't remember inviting you. Do you know what the consequences will be if you break into private property without permission? Just when Aston was confused, a gentle voice reached them. Their expressions suddenly changed, but before they could find the source of the sound, a blazing white light pillar penetrated the helicopter where Aston was, and a violent explosion destroyed all life on it. This is the price. Remember not to wander around casually in the next life. Captain. Damn it. What the hell is this? An alien? Fire. The mercenaries on the other helicopter saw Tony along the light beam, but they couldn't understand the steel battlesuit, but they also understood. This thing will kill them, so a lot of gunfire rang out, and 2 Viper missiles were fired from the helicopter's bomb rack. These are good babies I designed. I've been hit by them once. Looking at the familiar logo on the weapon reported by Jarvis, Tony had a look of disgust on his face, which obviously reminded him of bad experience. The steel battlesuit nimbly dodged the 2 most threatening missiles. Tony approached the hovering helicopter at high speed against the sea. The bullets fired by the mercenaries could not keep up with his speed. Occasionally, some bullets predicted in advance could not hit him. He made a threat, and in a blast, it was all over. Is this your last resort? It really disappoints me. Tony looked at the wreckage that fell into the sea and turned in the direction of Stark Industries. Although he couldn't see the building, he knew that Obadiah was watching here. The next moment, Tony suddenly accelerated towards the building, It was time to end everything. How many years have it been since I was so close to success again? When Howard died, who knew how excited I was? I thought I could control everything, but I was wrong. Obaday's eyes were filled with memories, just like people before death always think of their most profound memories. I thought I could develop Stark Industries, but those losers had no achievements. For this reason, I had to rely on Tony and return the power to him in exchange for a higher status. This was the beginning of failure. Like his father, Tony is a genius, but he is also a bastard. Why can't he be a researcher, obsessed with scientific exploration, even if he is a pure playboy, and leaves Stark Industries to me? Can't he? I can guarantee that he will have enough food and clothing. I have sniped countless competitors for Stark Industries, but in their eyes, I am just a dispensable obstacle. This is the human heart. It does not matter what you have done, but what you can do for them. Looking at the rising sun, Obadiah didn't mind its burning eyes. His eyes were also burning with rage, towards those who betrayed him, his enemies, and also towards himself. Originally, he was a loser, but he was also a loser. Will be the winner, Tony will die, and Stark Industry can only be decided by him. What is that? Just as Obadiah was immersed in his own world, a black spot appeared in the sunlight. Obadiah thought it was the shadow of a bird, although he didn't know why there were birds in Manhattan that could fly like this. Hi, but he soon realized something was wrong. The speed of the black spot was too fast, so fast that he couldn't even react. It was approaching him at an extremely fast speed. Bang! Huge amounts of impact instantly shattered the bulletproof glass in front of Obaday's eyes, and fragments flew everywhere. Obaday subconsciously raised his hands to protect his face. When he put down his arms, what he saw was wearing a red and gold steel battlesuit. Even the wily Obaday was shocked by what appeared in front of him, but Tony quickly pinned him to the ground. The huge force from the machine had exceeded the limit that humans could resist, so Obadiah Bidet was shocked and furious to find that he had become meat on the chopping board. However, what shocked him even more was the sound coming from the steel battlesuit. Oh, Obi, why are you so excited? I like the gift you gave me. Now let's play a game. I'll ask you questions. It's Tony. God. Obadiah always thought he was a genius, but he never thought that Tony could make such a terrifying weapon. Even if it was just the first contact, with that kind of speed, that kind of power, Obadiah knew very well that if it was used as a weapon in a war, weapons and steel battlesuits are of unparalleled value. Hey, Tony, listen, maybe we have some misunderstanding. Please let me go first. Obadiah panicked. He didn't know what Tony wanted to do, but being threatened by this weapon made him feel insecure. No, there's no misunderstanding. Let's get started. Tony's face under the mask showed a trace of morbid revenge pleasure. When Obaday screamed, he grabbed his right leg and lifted Obaday upside down. He got up and walked towards the glass that he had just knocked open. No, Tony, you can't do this. I am your uncle. Let me go. Huge amounts of fear invaded Obadiah's nerves. He had never seen Tony like this, so terrifying, cruel, like a vengeful beast. Haha, you are definitely my uncle, but are you sure you want me to let go now? Tony sneered and put Obadiah outside the window. Even if the sun was shining brightly, the cold air kept coming to Obadiah's body. It's more than 200 meters here. Do you want me to let go? No Tony, this is too dangerous, we shouldn't do this, you. Answer me. Ignoring Obadiah's words, Tony yelled directly. The powerful momentum made Obadiah at a loss what to do. Because of the reverse flow of blood from being inverted, his face began to turn red, but his thoughts were not so confused that he could not take care of himself. To the extent of, yes Tony, I was wrong, pull me into it and I apologize. Apologize? You want to apologize to me? Ha 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 ha, it's the second time. This is the second time. What are you going to do to apologize to me? Your life? Do you deserve it? Tony was still laughing. Obaday's heart fell completely to the bottom. When he saw the steel battle suit on him, Obadiah should know that his plan failed, but people always have a glimmer of hope, and then sink into the abyss of despair. Tony, we can have a good talk. I admit that I was wrong. I did a lot of wrong things, but I also did a lot for you. Without me over the years, there would be no Stark Industry today. This is my credit. Obaday knows very well that he is finished, but the top priority now is not to consider these, but to survive. Only alive can he make a comeback. If he dies, he will have nothing. Aren't we talking? Obi, you are the person I respected the most, except for my dead father. When I knew it was you who wanted to kill me, do you know how much my heart hurt? Huh? Calling out the affectionate nickname, Tony swayed a little and grabbed Obadiah's hand, which made Obadiah feel extremely uncomfortable. I gave you a chance. In these 2 months, I never banned you. See me. I hope you can take the initiative to confess to me, and I will forgive you, but you haven't. You didn't even call me, so I am very disappointed. To this day, you have sent me a few more small toys. I just know that you are hopeless. Then, goodbye Obi, say hello to God for me. Tony looked at the struggling Obadiah expressionlessly. He should have been filled with joy at getting revenge, but if he was sending away the last close elder with his own hands, that would not be so pleasant, because as Obadiah said, without him, there would be no Stark Industries now, and there would be no Tony Stark now. So after returning from the Imperial Cemetery, Tony did not directly attack Obadiah, but only used various pressures to make him apologize to himself. This way, at least Obadiah would have a chance to spend his remaining years in peace. Unfortunately, Tony he underestimated Obadiah's persistence, so he will never give Obadiah a chance again. Stop, Tony, you are committing a crime. You will destroy Stark Industry. Obadiah's face had turned purple, and his consciousness was a little confused. He glanced down unintentionally, making him a little dizzy. No, I won't. No one will know that I killed you. Tony never abides by the rules set by others. Obadiah thought that he would not do it blatantly, just like himself, even if he had ideas, will also be carried out in secret, but he forgot that Tony's nature is not a playboy, but wanton. Goodbye, Obi. After saying that, Tony released his grip on Obadiah, and his body of nearly 200 pounds gained extremely high acceleration in the air. Amidst a burst of screams, Obadiah emerged from this disappeared from the world. Looking at Obadiah's blurry body, Tony wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. He took off again, returned to his villa, took out a bunch of valuable collections from the wine store, and took a sip. Then he drank it in one gulp until his consciousness became blurry. Tony, oh, what happened to you, Jarvis? Open the window and let out the alcohol. After some time, Potts walked into the villa and saw Tony, who looked like he was soaking in a wine vat. He quickly ran over to help him up. He ventilated Jarvis. Potts, what's the matter? I'm very free now. No one can control me anymore, so I can do anything. Tony didn't know how much he drank, and it seemed like he was gushing out when he opened his mouth. He took a sip of alcohol, but the pungent smell did not make Potts disgusted. Instead, he paused and hugged Tony tightly. Tony, I know that Obadiah's death makes you sad, but you still have me, don't you? It will be lonely. After returning from the Imperial Cemetery, Tony didn't tell anyone that it was Obadiah who wanted his life, so Potts didn't know the reason. Instead, he thought that Obadiah's death was a huge blow to Tony. Will you always stay with me? Tony's eyes opened and closed, as if he would fall asleep at any time, but Potts still looked at him seriously. I will. Tony smiled after getting the answer, and lay on Potts' shoulder with satisfaction and fell into a deep sleep. Seeing this, Potts helped him to bed. She came here today to inform Tony about Obadiah's death and the chaos in the company situation, but now, she just wants this man to have a good sleep, and she will talk about the rest after he wakes up. Obadiah, president of Stark Industries, unfortunately fell and died. Was it an accident or man-made? Someone witnessed a mysterious flying object outside Stark Industries. Is it related to Obadiah's death? Tony Stark, chairman of Stark Industries, was so sad that he refused to accept all interviews and refused to participate in the board of directors. Stark Industries fell into temporary chaos. It was already the next day that Elbert received the news of Obadiah's death. After confirming the status of pioneer technology, Elbert was whitewashing Roz's group and selecting a few suitable black people to go to New York first. Leave it in the area for a few days, then mix it up and fish it out. Although it can't be hidden from some important departments, at least it can be exposed to the light. After registering their identities and doing some cover-ups, Elbert won't need to do anything in the future. Obadiah died so quickly. Tony's actions were really simple and violent. He is no longer Iron Man, just Iron Man, literally translated as Iron Man. He executes his own will. Sometimes, that's what a hero is. There is only a thin line between the criminal and the criminal. Elbert threw the newspaper aside. This result made him very satisfied. Sometimes it doesn't take much to change a hero. As long as you push it at the critical moment, your fate will be like a hero. A wild horse, you never know which direction it will run. Speaking of heroes, Elbert wondered if he should dig out the Captain of the United States now. But actually thinking about it, it was unrealistic. S.H.I.E.L.D. was probably close to finding his location, and it would be easy to cause trouble if he sent people there again. There was a conflict, and he was definitely the one who suffered the loss. Moreover, Rogers was not the kind of person who would be a mother if she had breasts. She would not unite with Elbert just because he saved him. He is the spiritual core of the Avengers Alliance, and it is not so easy for Tony to change. After all, Tony's character has problems to begin with, while Rogers is always upright, and he is also an unswerving American faction. What other heroes defend is justice, and Rogers defends American freedom. It's a pity about the Tesseract. I don't know where S.H.I.E.L.D. hid it. If he knew the place, Elbert wouldn't mind getting it first and using it. As a space gem, it should be able to provide Elbert with a way to deal with the Ancient One. He doesn't need to do too much. Elbert only needs to form a spatial anchor point to fix himself, instead of being played by the Ancient One. Elbert has the capital to fight the Ancient One head-on. Chairman, Mr. Scott was found dead in his home early this morning. The cause of death given by the medical examiner was gas poisoning. Caroline walked into Elbert's office with an ugly look on her face and placed a death notice on his desk. On the table, there is a photo of a middle-aged man lying on the bed. If I remember correctly, this is the third time that someone is breaking the rules. Elbert glanced at the photo on the death notice. Not surprisingly, the Wolf of Wall Street swore in front of him yesterday that he Elbert will definitely acquire pioneer technology successfully, but within a day, he has followed in the footsteps of his two predecessors. Chairman, this situation must be punished. Although there is no evidence, pioneer technology is the most suspected. As Elbert's secretary, Caroline is not almost fully responsible for Osborne Industries like Norman's secretary, but she was in the second-in-command position, but the people she hired were killed over and over again, which naturally made her particularly annoyed. Yes, they are the most suspect, but what do you do first? Report them? Or do you know some great people and are ready to take revenge? Elbert's eyes narrowed, revealing dangerous information. Maybe he has been stuck recently. The burden on Lorraine is a little heavy, making her a little impatient. Should she find someone to share it with her? Definitely. Caroline subconsciously wanted to say words of revenge, but as soon as she caught Elbert's eyes, her whole body suddenly became excited, and she quickly lowered her head and apologized. Yes, I'm sorry, Chairman, I was impulsive. It seems you are not confused yet. Forget today's conversation and go do your own thing. As for pioneer technology, give it up for now. Seeing Caroline exiting the office unwillingly, Elbert didn't say anything more. No one would be unresponsive when encountering this kind of thing. As long as it did not delay her normal work, Elbert would not do anything to her because of it, but pioneer technology. Elbert's fingers on the table were tapping rhythmically. He originally didn't want to break the rules easily. There was S.H.I.E.L.D. in front of him and Sorcerer Supreme in the back. Neither was easy to get along with, which made Elbert even more low-key, but pioneer technology has already slapped him in the face. Naturally, Elbert will not tolerate his provocation. Killing is the lowest method, but since Killian feels that he is good at this, he should just play with him. Lazar, how have you been lately? Elbert dialed a number and immediately heard loud music and all kinds of yelling. Without even thinking, he knew which bar Raza was staying in. It's definitely very beautiful, boss. From today on, the entire East District belongs to me. I can beat every one of those weaklings. Raza's voice was a little excited, although he used to be a warlord in charge of hundreds of people. Boss, how can a remote place like the Empire Cemetery compare with an international capital like New York? Oh, that's good. Find a separate place. The sound insulation over there is too bad. Elbert was about to talk to Raza about pioneer technology, but the sound from the other side became louder and louder, leaving Elbert quite speechless. But this is not because Raza stays in the bar all day long and has fun. Although this kind of thing is inevitable, Raza still has the restraint and knows when enough is enough. The reason why it is so noisy is simply that Raza's room in the bar is poorly soundproofed. This is his fault. It was a deliberate request. Elbert once asked him if he would not make a noise like this. Raza's answer to him was simple and noisy, but he felt excited. In the Imperial Cemetery, he had had enough of being quiet. Under the strong raids by the US military, he could only survive as long as he was as quiet as a sloth. But now, listening to all kinds of popular music, Watching the dance floor being wild and crazy, as a person who vents his desires, Raza feels that his life has never been so fulfilling. This is the empire he deserves, not that dark, lifeless camp. Boss, what's the matter? Raza's voice soon became quieter. This is why Elbert likes this guy. He is very obedient and will think about whether Elbert will do anything because of him. Feel happy or angry about the behavior. Someone wants to play with me outside the rules, so it's time for you to work. Bring your people and gather together. I will give you an address later and get rid of them. Elbert looked at the computer. The location shown on the screen is obviously not where Pioneer Technology is located. Killian is quite cautious and has specially arranged a scientific research base in the suburbs of New York. However, it is difficult to hide this from the eyes of interested people. As long as you check it, you can easily find it. Question. However, looking at the location of Killian's base, Elbert had some thoughts on whether to build his own laboratory. Even though he was no longer engaged in research work, many things were not suitable for Osborne Industries to handle. He also needed a place for personal matters. Don't worry, boss, I will mobilize my manpower right away. They are all absolutely loyal young men, and they are already proficient in operating the treasures you sent. I promise to complete the task. Raza sneered twice, and finally he could let go and work hard. Although he has been in conflict with the gangs in the East District during this period according to Elbert's orders, and gradually expanded his power, this is New York, and many things cannot be made big. This makes him, a violent person, very frustrated. He was really excited to go on a killing spree tonight. New York is always lively at night. As long as the weather permits, there are always countless young people preparing to start their own nightlife on the brightly lit streets. However, there is no such grand occasion in the suburbs of New York. As the moon rises, here as they fell into sleep, no one noticed that dozens of bat-like figures were flying across the night sky, rushing towards the already determined target at high speed. We're still 2 kilometers away from the destination. Please check the ammunition. This is our first mission. If someone loses his chain later, he won't have to go back. Raza's masked face showed no expression. But his eyes were very bright, and it was obvious that the desire that was about to be released put his whole body in a state of high excitement. Report to the boss. All equipment has been checked and there are no problems. Let's go in. More than a dozen Green Goblin skateboards were hovering in midair. With the help of analytical instruments, they could clearly see that they were hidden under the farm not far away. With a huge building, this is their goal. Don't worry, check where the exit is first. The boss means that no one will be left behind, but we can't let them escape. From the 2nd to the 7th, you guard the exit, and the others will follow me. Raza quickly scanned several suspicious places at the exit of the base. The manpower was allocated with a wave of his hand, and then roared down, like a bird of prey slaying its prey, quickly and accurately. Boom, boom, boom. Violent explosions kept ringing from the ground. People say that Green Goblin is an expert in biology, but he is also quite accomplished in applied physics, whether it is the Green Goblin skateboard or the miniature but extremely powerful pumpkin bomb, are all eye-catching products. Amid the screams that kept coming from the farm, Raza and his men flew directly into the building and successfully found the largest entrance after blowing up 3 houses. Hang the bomb back and prepare the submachine gun. Looking at the slightly narrowed tunnel and assessing the defensive power of his battlesuit, Raza decisively gave up on the art of explosions, took out submachine guns and flew into the tunnel, and started shooting whenever he encountered a living person. The sudden attack frightened the researchers at the experimental base. Not only did it not have any positive effect, but the supporting security guards had to send them away first before they could find the intruder. However, after this time passed, Raza had already led the people deep into the area. According to the research center, even if the Green Goblin skateboard slows down and flies at a low altitude, it is much faster than a human running. Leave me alone, you idiots, take the data away quickly. The research has reached a critical moment. If these data are missing, just wait for Aldrich Killian to twist your heads off. The person responsible for managing this research base, he was Killian's confidant. When he saw the security guard trying to send him out, he immediately yelled and scolded him. Given the importance of extremists to Killian, if he abandoned the information and ran away today, he would not just be able to escape a small punishment, he would also be tortured before he died. Oh, what kind of information is so important that you risk your life? Show it to me. Raza wearing a Joker mask flew over, holding a submachine gun in each hand, aiming it at the person who was about to evacuate. security guards and researchers. Intruder. How could it be so fast? You take the information and leave quickly. I'll stop him. Seeing Raza arriving here so quickly, the person in charge's expression changed, and then he decisively pushed the security guard towards the pile of chemicals. Paper information on the table. Oh, you think you can stop me? What gives you the courage, God? Raza was not worried at all about the escape of the security guards. All exits were guarded by their people, and they would never be able to escape. But the guy in front of me, who looked like a researcher at first glance, actually boasted about Heiko and said that he wanted to stop him. Do you really think that the submachine gun in his hand was harmful? Yes, who else but God can create such a miracle? What Raza couldn't think of was that the guy opposite him decisively admitted that it was indeed God who gave him the courage. The next second, this weak-looking researcher, a big transformation happened right in front of him. His muscles began to bulge, bursting out of his fitted clothes. Tracks like the flow of magma spread all over his body along the lines between the muscles. A large amount of heat erupted on his body, pulling him apart. Za could even smell sulfur. I'm Telefac, what the hell is this? Looking at the researcher, in the blink of an eye, he has grown from a normal person of 1.7 meters to a monster of over 2 meters, even the well-informed Raza. He swore swear words, and the 2 submachine guns in his hands sprayed greetings from heaven mercilessly. However, the bullets that could easily take away lives at ordinary times had no effect on the monster in front of him. The bullet holes that penetrated the body were completely restored in the next second. The strong body was hit with terrifying heat, and Raza had to giving up shooting. He drove the skateboard to quickly dodge. Looking at the melted ground under the monster's feet, Lazar felt a chill. His combat uniform could insulate him from heat, but against such a high temperature, he felt it was better not to be hit. Damn it, I don't believe you can recover infinitely. Being chased crazily in a narrow passage, Raza tried several times. After seeing that ordinary bullets had no effect on him, Raza gritted his teeth and risked being accidentally injured, and directly threw 2 pumpkin bombs. Boom! The narrow passage amplified the sound and power of the explosion several times, and the Green Goblin, who were chasing the security personnel in other places, began to gather here. You can't fucking recover. What kind of monster are you? Looking at the monster that had half of its body blown off but was left to slowly recover, Raza's face suddenly became extremely ugly. How should he kill this?